Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we are going to be diving in to the Spectacle of Spite and talking about why it can absolutely destroy your opponents. So, before my channel unfortunately got hacked, I was going to do this video in, kind of preparation or well before the Warhammer World Championships. And it turns out that out of 11 Dark Eldar players, Drukhari players, who entered the World Championships, only one of them was playing Spectacle of Spite, but that player happened to do the best out of nearly all the Drukhari players. Did very well, won most of their games, and on top of that, proved that this detachment is absolutely insane. And hopefully, maybe, if we're lucky, he'll come on the channel and talk to us later on. But I just want to say that I have tried this detachment myself, and it's absolutely brutal, and it takes a lot of opponents very off guard. So without further ado, let's go and dive right in. So in today's video, we're going to be doing a overview of the detachment ability, enhancements, and stratagems of Spectacle of Spite. We're going to be looking at their key units, and lastly, the army style and win condition for the list. In future videos, we are going to be going over the, kind of general deployment and strategy for the army, and of course, going over a list that I've had success with. So first of all, let's look at their detachment rule. So the detachment rule is one of the best in the codex. It is combat drugs. So not only is this really fun to use, but it's actually very powerful. And what it does is basically gives the whole army, Witch Cult units only, but essentially the whole army, because you're going to be using a lot of Witch Cult units, a buff. Now, you can either choose a buff, which you can only do once per battle. You can't select the same buff twice in the same battle. For example, number 1, Adrenalite, you can't choose to add 1 to the attack's characteristics 2 times in the same battle. However, you can do it randomly and roll 2 dice and just add the results together. And even if you repeat a result, this is still allowed. I guess basically it's the witch form of, kind of mixing drugs up, But anyway, maybe a little bit of a hot shot, stuff like that. So they like to lace their drugs a little bit, add a little bit of flavor to it. But yeah, basically that's what it does. Now there's quite a few bonuses here. Most of them have to do with combat ability. There are a couple utility ones like add 2 to the movement characteristic, number 2 Hypex, of course. There is adding 1 to the toughness, which makes models tougher. This is really good for models like Hellions and Reavers, who are already kind of decently tough for Dark Eldar, and they actually do get very tough with this. And then, of course, you have the Splinter Mind, which gives ballistic skill and leadership, which is decent in those turns where you need a little bit of extra leadership characteristic. For example, against Tyranids, in which +1 leadership would be really good against Shadows in the Warp. Next up, we have the enhancements. Now, the enhancements are pretty interesting. We have the Pharmacopex, which basically just gives a succubus model an extra drug result for her unit. Now, this is good, but unfortunately, you can only take 3 succubuses in your army, and all of the other enhancements are just better. And also, of course, you can't repeat the same combat drug. So oftentimes, if you're choosing a drug, then 1 out of 6 chance this is going to have no effect. If you're rolling 2 dice on the chart, then 1 out of 3 chance that this will have no effect. So really, honestly, for 15 points, very decent, but not that great when you consider the other ones. So next up, we have the Chrono Shard. Now, the Chrono Shard is fights first once per game. Now, this is really powerful because it allows a big squad of witches to fight first, which is absolutely amazing in this detachment because we have access to counter-charging mechanics through our stratagems, which I will go into later. But also, this detachment loves to heroically intervene. Has a lot of melee units that are very fast and can get into good positions quickly, so Chrono Shard is a natural take. Next up, we have the Parafaf of Torments, or Paratap of Torments, whatever. And this is going to be immune to Overwatch for 25 points. Bears units immune to Overwatch. Absolutely necessary in an army that has a 6-up armor save or invul save throughout the whole list. So you really do need it because Dark Eldar are even more susceptible to Overwatch than regular Eldar are, and that's saying a lot. Lastly, we have Morgana's Curse, which gives a Succubus +1 AP and +1 damage on their melee weapons, turning the normal Succubus into a character that may or may not kill a character to something that will definitely kill an enemy character. And just because of that, kind of agonizer combo that they have where they have anti-infantry 3+, this will guarantee that they do a lot of damage against the right targets. So very good enhancement selection. Honestly, I think some of the best in the codex as far as the enhancements go, and very powerful. You're going to take Chrono Shard, Paratap of Torments, and Morgana's Curse in nearly every single game. So as for the strats, this is really where the detachment comes into its own. The combat drugs is great, the enhancements are great, but the stratagems are really what activate this army even more and make it more deadly. So we have Deadly Debut, I should say, Fight Phase, one Drukhari unit from your army that made a charge move this turn. Now keep in mind this is not just Wytch cult units, but Drukhari units in general. Basically giving your unit lethal hits. Now if your unit is additionally a Wytch unit, which has to be Witches, can't just be Wytch cult, they gain +1 AP as well. So against things that don't have a 4+ invul save, your units are going to hit extremely hard, especially against basic units like Marines, which is typically have a little tiny bit of trouble getting through heavier armor. But with their buffs that we got in the codex, and you combine that with the +1 AP for this stratagem, witches have no trouble blowing through Space Marines in more ways than one. Next up is a challenge met. Now this is the quintessential stratagem of the entire detachment. It's what makes it so good at what it does. And it essentially allows you, at the end of your opponent's movement phase, to select one Wytch cult unit from your army, and that unit can basically declare a charge move against that target within 9. So it could be any target, just has to be within 9 inches of your unit, and just needs to have ended a normal or advanced move or set up on the battlefield, right? Now, it does need to be within 9, so something that is rapid ingressing outside of 9 would not be affected. Or deep striking, not rapid ingress, deep strike. But your unit can declare a charge against that target, and you might be thinking to yourself, well, 9 inches is really quite a lot of distance. Usually, in my experience, it's not a 9-inch charge. Usually, if an enemy unit wants to move, they're going to be moving closer to you because they want to charge you, or you are going to be up in their face, and they're going to have to end a move closer or maybe even farther back, and you get to charge them. In any case, you do not receive a charge bonus, but keep in mind, this is your opponent's turn. So that means because you're the inactive player, whatever you charge, unless that unit has fights first, you are going to be selecting the first unit to fight in the normal fight step. So be, obviously after the fights first step. So any other charges that your opponent, charges in, they're going to get to attack first. But this particular unit is going to be able to strike first in that step, which is really good. Again, unless the enemy unit has fights first. But, there's some nuance there as well. Now, this combos really well with the Chrono Shard, which I talked about earlier, which gives the unit fights first naturally. So this means this is a really good counter to fights first units, because it's going to be during your opponent's turn. They're going to be wanting to charge in, and maybe they have, some sort of like impact mortals or something like that. This totally negates that, right? If your opponent needs to make a charge move to activate their ability, then they're just simply not going to be able to do it, which is great. Really allows this unit to, just go off on opponents. This also combos well with Hellions, because Hellions have a D6 move when enemies move within 9 inches. which basically guarantees that they'll make an easy charge roll most of the time. It is 2 CP. This detachment is kind of pressed on CP, but because you're going to be taking a lot of succubuses, if succubuses are in a unit and they destroy something, they get +1 CP, which we'll talk about later. Okay, next up we have a 2 CP Fight on Death. One Witch Cult unit gets to Fight on Death. No rolls necessary, just pure Fight on Death. Great for getting around fights first. You know, another one of those things that's awesome, right, about this is that there's a lot of armies that just charge into you, and because you may not necessarily have fights first on every witch unit, they can just kill you, right? So, like, let's say somebody charges a big squad of 10 Hellions and absolutely wrecks that unit. Well, normally that'd be just a unit gone without anything to do. But in this case, for 2 CP, you can still get them to attack, which is really good. So it at least gives you some value there. Preternatural agility allows your Witch Cult units to move over enemy units when they make normal, advance, or charge moves, which is really good. So start of your movement or charge phase, you can charge over enemy units or move over enemy units. Really quite good. Now, you can't move through terrain with this move, but being able to move through enemy units means that your opponent can't really screen you. And this is really important because this army, its weakness is a lot of its melee units do not have fly. So the main witch units do not have fly. They can't charge over enemy models. Now they can, right? So this is big for witches in particular. Last two is Feigned Weakness, which is just a fallback, shoot, and charge stratagem. So, you know, your basic lightning fast reactions, or not lightning fast, sorry, Feigned Retreat, right? Eldar ability, Eldar stratagem, very common. And then lastly, Acrobatic Display, which gives a witch unit a 5+ invulnerable save in your opponent's shooting phase. Now, I don't particularly like this one, but it can make a unit of Hellions or Reavers really durable on a turn in which they also have +1 toughness. This is a really good ability if your opponent is a little bit squeamish and tries to not fully engage your army all at once, doesn't want to reveal too much. You can pop this stratagem in addition to something like Smoke, right? So if you have 2 CP available in the bank, you know, maybe you went first, your opponent went second, you move up a unit, you know, you select +1 toughness, and then your, you know, unit of 6 Reavers has a 5+ invulnerable save, and, you know, etc. Or maybe you have Hellions and they're going to just go forward, pop Smoke, and just be -1 to hit, toughness 5, 5 up invul, right? They're going to be a little bit tougher than normal. Kind of, I would say, probably not going to be used that much, but at the same time, it is decent to have a durability strat in such a very squishy detachment. Okay, let's talk about the key units that the Spectacle of Spite is going to have. So the first unit is, of course, Witches. This is the main unit, and it's going to be doing most of the work, believe it or not. Next up, we have Hellions. They're a awesome unit. Again, really strong, really hard hitting. They're going to be your big hammer units. They're going to be the unit that takes out whatever your witches can't deal with. You have Reavers, which are your fast engage type units. Are going to be pinning your opponent in the deployment zone and really preventing them from moving around the board easily. You have the Succubus, which is the character that's going to boost your witch squads and take those enhancements. And lastly, you have Lilith, because she is just an absolute beast, and she also does benefit from pain tokens and combat drugs. So, you know, being able to boost your witches to strength 4, get some extra AP, and benefit from combat drugs yourself is pretty awesome. So first up, we have Witches. Now, Witches are going to be your mainstay battle line unit. They do have OC2, may not sound that important, but in this type of list, it really is for stealing objectives and just absolutely destroying your opponents. They're really good in combat. If you look at their base stat line, it's much better than in the index. You have 3 gladiatorial weapons in the unit, which have 5 attacks apiece, which is just absolutely murderous, at strength 4, AP2, damage 1. You add on combat drugs, and these become just insane. These can also advance and charge, which is even more insane when you consider you can put them in things like a raider to get an extra 3 inches on your disembark, be immune to Overwatch, and perhaps even have fights first. It's just a crazy combination of abilities and skills to have. Also, not that it's a big deal, but if opponents want to fall back from them, they have to take desperate escape tests. Again, not the best ability, but really good for locking down opponents and especially characters. That's the key. Infantry characters who survive combat can't really fall back that easily from them, right? On a roll of a 1 or a 2, they will die. That's a 33% chance. Most people will not want to risk that. And if they do risk it, well, you might get a chance to kill them. Now, the other cool thing about witches is now they have a baseline grenades keyword, which means you don't have to worry about that stupid grenade pack, that Phantasm grenade launcher from the Hecatrix anymore. And also the Hecatrix gets a power weapon, which is really good as well. It's 5 attacks, strength 3, but it's anti-infantry 3+, really good against infantry. Next up, we have Hellions. So Hellions are going to be your hammer, and if you're wondering why, just look at the Hellglaive. So the Hellglaive has Lance, sustained hits 1, strength 4, AP -1, damage 2, which is a big deal, but they also get +1 attacks and strength when you empower them with their pain ability. Really powerful. So they go up to strength 5 and 4 attacks. But it doesn't stop here. They can actually get even worse for your opponent, because not only can they gain this, but through the detachment, they can gain an additional strength, they can gain an additional attack. So if you're going against things like Marines, you're going to be swinging in at 5 attacks apiece on that turn if you choose the +1 attack combat drug, or strength 6 against Terminator type units. Even though they're only AP -1, that's a lot of attacks going into that squad, especially in a squad of 10. So these guys are really, really powerful. Of course, you add that, to lethal hits, stratagem, or something like that, and these guys just absolutely butcher everything. They also have deep strike, so they're a great rapid ingress target to put in reserves and then rapid wherever you need them for the following turn. Now, as for their other things, they have splinter pods, which are okay anti-infantry, but they're AP 0. They are twin linked. They do quite a bit of wounds, especially in big squad, but you're forcing just a lot of armor saves essentially. And you may not have line of sight to your target always. The Heliarch is the leader, can take a power weapon or a stun claw. I personally don't like these types of weapons because we already have a ton of different things that give us those bonuses, anti-infantry 3+, devastating wounds. I don't know, not that great. I think the stun claw, if it had like anti-infantry 3+ on top of devastating wounds, that'd be really, really good, but it just doesn't, right? Precision is only really going to matter against tougher, characters in general, and because it's only damage 1, it just kind of has a negative synergy there, right? You're kind of spreading your damage out instead of just dealing all of it at once to the unit as a whole. So I personally just like the Hellglaive, even though the Sunclaw has dev wounds. That's just my personal opinion. Let me know in the comments if you feel differently about it. Skyboard Evasion, also pretty good. It's basically the Ranger ability. If an enemy unit ends a normal, advance, or fallback move within 9 of a unit, you can make a d6 normal move. So allows them to use that stratagem we talked about earlier way better. All right, Reavers are next. Reavers are going to just be your kind of alpha strike or, type of recon unit. They're going to try to pin your opponent in your deployment zone and strike fast and strike quickly. Now, their big thing is that they can advance 8, right, for a pain token. This means they can move 24 inches in a single turn. Eviscerating Flyby allows this 24-inch advance move to actually benefit from the ability to deal mortal wounds to your opponent. So for each model in your unit, on a roll of a 4+, excluding monsters and vehicles, of course, because you can't do damage to them for some reason, the enemy unit suffers a mortal wound. pretty good, especially when you have cluster caltrops. Really do like cluster caltrops, but if you're running squads of 6 in this particular detachment, having grav talons might be the better option because you can take 2 grav talons. Their melee weapons get an additional -1 AP. So Bear's melee weapons have an armor pen characteristic of -2 instead of normal -1 with the blade veins, and they get lethal hits. This is on top of blade veins already having lance. So if you guys notice, Reavers have been buffed significantly in close combat. Reavers can actually quite easily deal with a lot of the, kind of quote unquote infiltrating units and scouting units that your opponent might have for scoring. And that's really good because if you can eliminate your opponent's scoring units like really fast in the game, then you can bleed your opponent out of resources over the course of the game. So having that ability is really good. These guys are awesome. You can take a heat lance per 3, so you can take 2 heat lances if you purchase a squad of 6. The heat lances are good. They've never really done much for me, to be honest. I don't know what it is. I always seem to miss with them or whatever. But they can do some significant damage to vehicles. If you're lucky enough, they can even kill a vehicle. But again, you have to roll really good for that. So usually that's not going to happen. But they do have assault, so that means you can advance and shoot. Alternatively, you can take a blaster, but it's never really worth taking the blaster because the stats of the heat lance are just so much better. And really, that's it. They're pretty cheap too. They're 130 points for 6, 70 points for 3. You can easily run a big squad of 6 and a couple 3-man units, or you could just run a couple 3-man units and call it a day there and maybe go for cluster caltrops instead of grav talons. However, I would say that the grav talon is really good in this detachment because Reavers are going to be wanting to get into close combat. Next up, we have the Succubus. Now, the Succubus is really powerful, really cheap character, only 50 points, rerolls hits and wounds against characters. So I heard a comment earlier on the channel that was a little bit incorrect. A lot of people don't know exactly how this ability works. So it says each time this model makes a melee attack that targets a character unit, not a character, but a character unit. This means that you can choose to not use the precision of the model. So the model does have precision on her weapon, her Archive Glaive and Agonizer. You do not have to do this, right? You can simply reroll the hit roll and reroll the wound roll against the regular unit as long as there's a character in it. So if you have a captain joined with, I don't know, Blade Guard or something, you will be rerolling all your hits and wounds against the Blade Guard unit in general. Now, each time this model's unit destroys a character model, you gain 1 CP. So if your unit charges in and maybe they have like 3 Blade Guard and a captain, right? If you kill that entire unit with your entire unit, you do still get a CP. Okay, just to be clear, that's how the ability works. That's how it's read. If you read it, you'll see, right? She also gives the unit sustained hits 1. So she really pumps up the damage of witches for a low cost of 50 points. Now, the last thing she does is for a pain token, while you're advancing, you can reroll advance or charge rolls. So either an advance roll or a charge roll. This is nice because it adds a little bit of reliability to the unit. If you really do need to, reroll in advance, you roll a 1 or something like that, this is very helpful. Okay, so lastly, she's pretty good in combat. She has 7 attacks, hits on 2s, strength 3, AP -2, damage 1, anti-infantry and precision. This doesn't seem that great at first, but remember, we have that enhancement Morgana's Curse. So for 70 points, you're not getting damage 1, and you're not getting AP -2. You're getting AP -3 and damage 2. So all of a sudden, you are putting units that would normally benefit from something like Armor of Contempt, you're putting them to their invul save, right? If they do have an invul save of 4+. If not, AP -3 will bring a 3+ to a 6+, which is a big deal. Lastly, but not least, we do have that stratagem that gives witches -1 extra AP, and guess what? A succubus attaches to witches, which means she will benefit from the -1 AP as well. So she'll actually be at AP -4 with that enhancement, which is just absolutely insane. Just ignores marine armor altogether. So the succubus, believe it or not, can actually be a very effective killer of space marines and other tough, high armor targets. Lastly, we have Lilith. Now, Lilith, what can I say? She's awesome. She's always going to be awesome. She's not quite as OP as she was in the index, but she gained precision, which means she's able to easily, without having to spend CP, kill characters. This is massive. Now, you might be asking, why is this such a big deal, Proxy Hammer? And that's because a lot of opponents don't have many characters that are just easy to kill, right? We kind of think about it like that because we're Eldar players. We have a lot of characters in our armies. Usually there's going to be one character out there for your opponent to score assassination on. But a lot of other armies might not have a lot of characters. So being able to run her into a unit, butcher the character no matter how tough the unit is, and then just, the rest of her squad can kind of damage the unit as it is very powerful. It means you can score things like assassination much easier. She also basically does the same thing as she did before. She has a 3+ invulnerable save once per game and an attacks characteristic of 12 during the fight phase when she fights, again only once per game, but she also has fights first and she gives her unit fights first. Now this is a very important distinction because a lot of players have again come to me with the wrong information. They have told me, Proxy Hammer, she doesn't have fights first. She just gives her units fights first while she's leading a unit. Look at her core rule, right? Look at her core rules. Also, I've checked this in the actual codex and it's the same way. She has fights first herself. So even when she's alone, she has fights first. Lastly, she has a pain token to improve the strength and AP of models in her unit by 1. So witches are really, really hitting hard against basically anything that doesn't have an invulnerable save. She's really powerful. She's only 85 points too, which is like dirt cheap for what she can pull off in a game. Okay, now let's talk about some of the supporting units that you might want to pick up with this detachment. So again, these are kind of units that you may or may not select for your army depending on what your build is, but here's the ones that I think work well with the detachment. Racks are pretty good because they can cause battle shock to enemy units at range, lowering OC to 0 and preventing stratagems. This is important for preventing things like Overwatch or durability stratagems or reactive move stratagems, anything that can really prevent you from doing what you need to do. So what I mean by reactive move stratagems is I mean like after you shoot, right? So, or after you charge or declare charge, things of that nature. So it's not going to prevent things where you're moving, right? Because obviously that's the shooting phase, it's just not going to happen. But if an opponent has a reactive stratagem that activates after you shoot them, then this would be really good. So racks can do that, right? And it can also prevent some other things in the charge phase. Not the best unit with the Spectacle Spite, but I can definitely see it having a place as a minor support unit in the backfield. Mandrakes are great because they can infiltrate, they have uppy downy for secondaries and screening, so you do need Mandrakes in this detachment. I think 2 squads of 5 is good. I think if you really want to kind of like maximize the amount of witches you have in the list, you can probably get away with 1 Mandrake, but I would suggest 2. Kabbalite Warriors are really good because they can sticky objectives and screen the backfield. Providing sticky can be very good in a number of matchups, so that's nice. It also gives you a tiny bit of ranged firepower. It's not really that big of a deal for a list like this, but having a Dark Lance in the back that can like pick off the odd model or wreck a Viper or something really, really small in a single phase of shooting so you don't have to worry about charging it can be pretty decent. Scourges with Shard Carbines are really good because they provide 6-inch deep strike, allow you to score additional secondary points or eliminate weak units. Pretty good. Again, 6-inch deep strike with a grenade combination is nice, but you might not have a lot of CP to work with. So Scourges with Shard Carbines are a utility pick and a little bit of a fringe pick. A little bit niche. Lastly, we have Scourges with heavy weapons. These are essentially mandatory, right? They're mandatory in almost every Dark Eldar list. You do need some ranged firepower that can, damage or fully take out something that's a vehicle or monster. These eliminate tough targets that your Witch Cult units will have trouble destroying, or just simply putting enemy units in range of your Witch Cult units to destroy. Again, we've done the math before on this channel about Hellions in this detachment. They can do like 16 or 18 wounds to a knight, which is insane, right? So, like, you know, basically having a squad of Scourges to do like, 8 wounds to a knight, and then 8 or 10 wounds, and then destroy them with the Hellions is a really good way to go. Okay, so lastly, let's talk about the army style and win condition. So this is an aggressive board control type of army. It's full on, full send all the time. It's just a wild ride, right? Now, what I mean by board control is you're controlling your opponent's ability to move across the board, right? In that you're so aggressive and you have that stratagem that we talked about to allow you to be in a position to where your opponent really can't move where they want to go. So when you push up the board and control your opponent's movements with your insane threat range and the powerful countercharge stratagem that you have, they're often just not going to be able to respond to the massive amount of fast, hard-hitting units that you can bring to bear. They're just not going to be able to do it. And witches aren't that fragile in close combat. So once you get stuck into combat, they're actually really annoying to remove. They have 4+ invul saves, right? You have access to fallback, shoot and charge, pretty universally across the whole army. And it just becomes insane, right? If somebody falls back from you, you can just charge them again with that stratagem, that countercharge strat, if they fall back from you. So there's really nothing your opponent can really do to unstick themselves once they are stuck. The win condition of this army, of course, is to secure your expansion objective with a fights first unit, typically, the Chrono Shard or Lilith's unit. I kind of like the Chrono Shard because it's a little cheaper. And you eliminate your opponent's expansion and mid with fast moving melee specialists. But really what you want to do is look for opportunities where your opponent is staging a large force behind some terrain, and you want to position your witches in such a way that you can just throw them in there and kill as much as possible and make it really hard for your opponent to untangle themselves from that position. And then that way you ensure that you continue to score primary points on your expansion, regardless of whether or not your enemy can, sneak something around it, because, you have fights first, remember. And you also have the countercharge ability. So if your opponent really wants to get in there with something, it's going to be really difficult. Lastly, this army is probably the best, most insane army for a go turn that I have ever seen. If your opponent doesn't have a great way to stop mass melee, you can easily charge 3 or 4 witch squads into your opponent at once. Now, this is dependent largely on what you roll for your charge rolls, obviously, and how deep your opponent goes. But there are several boards with staging areas that are in, the middle of the midboard, and your opponent is going to, in a competitive setting, they're going to be able to get right up to the ruin footprint or right up to the ruin wall and snuggle in, right? They're going to snuggle their asses in there, and they're going to be pretty hard to stop. But this army has the power, the raw power, and, movement and, agility to just surpass anything that your opponent can do to stop them realistically, right? So if you charge a bunch of units in there, heroic intervention doesn't really matter, right? Like if you're charging 3 or 4 of your opponent's units behind staging areas on turn 1 or turn 2, your opponent's not going to be able to respond correctly or in the way that they want to, right? Because you're just going to destroy so many models, and then on their turn, they're not going to be able to move any of their models or do anything with any of their stuff that's, kind of in those staging areas. So they're going to have a really hard time getting out. And like I said, a lot of the times it's just about managing your resources. One weakness I think of this army is that its resource management is difficult. A lot of players look at this list and this army and say, the detachment rule's really good, the enhancements are really good, the stratagems are really good. But am I really always going to have 2 CP to use? Well, the answer is yes, guys. The answer is absolutely yes. And there's a couple reasons for this. One, your succubuses give you back CP. That's the first thing. Also, you're going to have a lot of pain tokens in your list. Chances are, maybe you have a Chronos in your list, right? So you can regenerate pain tokens that you use, right? Keep your Chronos next to your witches so that if you choose to use a pain token to advance them, you can regain it back, right? That's big, especially during the first turn of the game. In the later stages of the game, you're already going to have enough pain tokens because you're going to be killing stuff, right? You're going to be killing enemy units. You're going to be causing battle shock tests. That's another thing about the racks, by the way, that I think they could be useful is for causing battle shock. But, it is what it is. They're racks. They really don't belong in this detachment. I just think a squad of 5 for, 65 points might not be a bad investment if you're having pain token issues, right? So essentially, the command point, from a command point perspective, you really don't have a lot of issues, right, with gaining command points, if you think about it. Now, the other thing is pain tokens, which, again, like I said, you're going to be killing stuff, you're going to be causing battle shock, you're going to be resurrecting some of your pain tokens. You're going to have pain tokens. Just that simple. So, having said that, if your opponent doesn't give you anything, that might be a problem, but it is not the end of the world. Not all of your witch units need to advance and charge. Sometimes just one witch unit with like Lilith or with the Ignore Overwatch succubus can really just gum up your opponent in their staging areas and make life really hard. And also, a lot of your units are just so fast. Like Reavers can move 24 inches a turn on an advance. If they just want to move normally and charge, they can move 16 inches, possibly 18 if you have I think it's Adrenalite, the +2 movement combat drug, right? So they can move extremely fast and still charge. If you don't want to do that, you can of course just move over an enemy unit, do a bunch of mortal wounds, and then shoot them. So, and then move block them, of course. So even without engaging them in combat, you can still get the job done against certain armies. Because against certain armies, you might not want to charge Reavers because maybe they have a fights first unit nearby. Like if I was going against Eldar and they had Howling Banshees and Jane's R, I would not want to charge my Reavers in because you're just giving your opponent a free kill in their turn, right? The best thing to do in that case is just move up, shoot something, 2 heat lances into something powerful, like, I don't know, like a wave serpent, for example. If you can get 2 heat lances into a wave serpent and you manage to, get through their invul save, that can be a really devastating blow to an Eldar player. That's basically game, right? If their fire dragons can't hop in and out of a transportal game, or, their dark reapers can't hop in and out of their falcon, it's going to be very hard for them to win after that. So being able to, destroy those tools early on can be good, even though it doesn't have a super high chance of doing it. Otherwise, doing the mortal wounds, attacking with the splinter rifles can neuter an aspect warrior unit, all for the low price of 130 points in the early game. And this can really set up the rest of the game for you, because if you have a ton of witches on the field, right, and they're in their raiders kind of parking up and just getting to the staging areas correctly, your opponent is going to have a hard time dealing with that threat. So this list is really powerful against a number of opponents. Actually, I do want to, at some point, I'm going to reach out to the guy who ran the Spectacle Spite list in the, WCW World Championships of Warhammer. See if he wants to come on the channel, talk a little bit about the strategy and the list and stuff. Because I feel like for a massive, massive portion of the community, Reaper's Wager is like the only way to go in their minds. And I totally disagree with this. And I think if you ask anybody, and I think I'm just going to say it, I think the main reason people played Reaper's Wager so much in World Championships of Warhammer was because of Skari. Because Skari is pretty much undisputed, the best Dark Eldar player in the world. He was saying Reaper's Wager is the way to go. The rerolls are the way to go. You know, and Skari had a very powerful Reaper's Wagers list that he'd been playing for a long time. I don't think Skari wanted to relearn the wheel with his army, right? I think that's really the reason he didn't really choose any other detachments. Because even though he's a just absolutely fantastic, phenomenal player, he wanted to choose something that he was so familiar with that it was almost like putting on a glove, right? A well-worn glove. And I don't think Spectacle of Spite was that for him, right? He's obviously run Wytch detachments before, but what has he been running in the past 3 months? He's been running Reaper's Wager, right? So when all the other players kind of copied that, I think they did themselves a disservice in not really looking at some of the other detachments and other possibilities. Because the Spectacle of Spite Dark Eldar list that was brought to Worlds did really good. And that's not taking anything away from any of the Dark Eldar players there. But Spectacle of Spite brought something to the table that opponents weren't prepared for and they couldn't deal with. And I believe that Spectacle of Spite might become one of the more popular detachments in the Drukhari meta. But we'll have to see. I think with the well performance of that list, you're going to see a lot more people going into Wytches, which is really cool. I love Wytches. I think they're a really cool unit. I've always really enjoyed them. I have really good memories of playing in 5th edition with Wytches when they had the Shardnet and Impalers, you know, gladiator weapons. And back then they could prevent models from attacking because, you know, the idea was you throw the net over. If you guys know anything about like the Roman gladiatorial like contests, you had the Rotarius or Rotarius, I can't really pronounce it, but it was a gladiator that had a net and a trident. So the Shardnet and Paler is obviously, you know, inspired from that. And I just thought it was so cool to have like all the shard nets and stuff like that surrounding your opponent and making them. It was so funny. I had Abaddon on like 1 attack. Like I was surrounding him with those, and I had Abaddon on 1 attack, and I had like a succubus just in there, just like wailing on Abaddon. It was hilarious. So anyway, witches are really good. This army is really powerful, and I think it's going to see a lot of action in the coming months. Okay, so in conclusion, Spectacle Spite is the fastest, most aggressive attachment available for the Drukhari, and it's also just really, really fun to play. I have not had as much fun playing the other detachments as this one. This is Razor's Edge. This is really really exciting detachment to play. Like, honestly, if you're one of those players who loves aggressive play, this is the list for you. It's not Kabalite Cartel. Kabalite Cartel is very defensive. Reaper's Wager is very, you know, kind of situational based, has like a tool for everything. It's very solid in a lot of ways, but it is not the most aggressive detachment. This detachment is faster and more aggressive than Sky Splinter Assault. Not only does it boast one of the best stratagems in the game for control, by the way, that charge stratagem it has is bonkers. It's just absolutely devastating. It is worth 2 CP for sure. I think if it was 1 CP, it'd be fucking busted, and I'd be the first person to say like this is busted. 2 CP I think is fair for this detachment, but it is a really good stratagem and it pisses people off. And it makes it really hard for them to actually play around your army, which is really good. Overall, I just think it's just one of the best detachments, not only in the Drukhari Codex, but perhaps even in the game. Like, and that's saying a lot, right? I don't think it is the best. I think actually the new Ultramarines detachment, the Lords of Ultramar or whatever the hell they just got. God, by the way, prepare for more Ultramarines in tournaments, guys. My God, I thought I was done with them, but they're back. They're back. Anyway, so I don't think this is the most powerful detachment in the game, but I think it's one of the best. I think top 10. I would argue top 10 detachments in the game, bar none. I think it's really good. I think it's overrated. Or sorry, not overrated. I think it's underrated. I think a lot of players, think it's maybe overrated, but it's not. It's really powerful. And it can work into a number of different army archetypes. It's good into vehicles. It's good into monsters. It's good into pretty much anything like infantry, hordes. It's just something that has all the right damage capabilities, all the right movement capabilities, and on top of it all, it's just filled with beautiful, beautiful drug crazed women. I'm just kidding. I yeah, but yeah, it's a crazy detachment. It's pretty awesome. Okay, guys, that's gonna be it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Hopefully we can get back on track with more videos to come pretty soon. I have a couple of things that I want to discuss about the Eldari. I've been playing, oh God, I've been playing so much Eldari lately. I haven't even really played Drukhari since the channel got hacked, but before the Warhammer World Championships, I was playing the Spectacle of Spite a little bit, and it's so awesome that someone was able to represent it in the championship. So, I will get back to playing more Drukhari, but I also do want to provide some insights on the Eldari because I think, yeah, in a future video, we're going to have to talk about that because there's some things that are going to happen to us guaranteed the next time we get a balance patch. And I don't mean to scare anybody, but we will talk through it in a future video and just kind of my thoughts about it and so forth. Anyway, guys, thank you once again to all the people who support the channel. If you want to join the Patreon, I have the link in the description for you. You just have to click on it. You can join for a free trial, or if you want to support the channel, you can, of course, also support. I do have a channel store page with, Eldar inspired apparel on it. If you want, a Eldar shirt or sweater or beanie, I'm a personal fan of beanies. I love beanies. Then, it's a really good product, and it's awesome to like wear around the around the shop, around your local game store. Lastly, I do have an Amazon store page, which I'm going to revamp soon because I think all the products are like out of date by now, but you can check it out, see if there's some discounts on there. And that's it, guys. Yeah, thank you for watching the video. Really appreciate it, and see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.